Welcome to the sharing. I'm Kate DeRight. I am the creative director of Spectra, which is the organization that commissioned this research. And Who's the Boss research has explored how people with learning disabilities train to do high-level jobs in the arts. And today we're going to be discussing what that research has uncovered. We'll do this largely through an interview format, so I might give you a bit of information to start things off, but then it'll be a lot of conversation with Hazel Sealeaf, who's done the research, and with Charlotte Little from DIY, and Paul Wilshaw, who have both lots of experience in this area and have also contributed to the research as well. We'll have some time for questions and answers at the end of the audio, towards the end of the session, and Josie's going to be looking after the chat. So if you need anything, please let her know. This is, as much as we're kind of all in our own spaces, this is an inclusive shared space. So please do feel free to turn your cameras on, turn them off if you need to get up and move around, whatever you need to help you to be here. Please make yourself as comfortable as possible. We are going to start off the way we start off most of our meetings and sessions, which is with just a little bit of grounding to get us all into the space together. The only thing you need to keep doing while we do this is breathing, because we all need to do that. I'm going to guide us through some particular breathing, but it's an invitation, and you are very welcome to breathe how you wish throughout. So I've got my feet planted on the floor. If that's not working for your body or your situation, that's absolutely fine. I'd like you to think about whatever is making contact with whatever is beneath you. For me, that's my feet. So before I tune into them, I'm going to close my eyes because that helps me. If you want to close your eyes, you can. If you want to just cast your glance downwards and relax the muscles around your eyes, that's just fine. The idea is just to take in a little bit less information through your vision. So, going back to your feet or whatever it is that's touching what's beneath you, give them a little wiggle. Move them around so that you can really get a sense of what's underneath you and how that gives you strength and supports you. And you let that feeling of support travel up to your knees and into your hips, and maybe a little wiggle on your seat if you're seated, just to get a nice sense of that connection. And let that feeling of support travel all the way up your back, maybe straightened you up a little bit, and you can give your shoulders a bit of a circle around up towards your ears and then back down to release any tension. And that feeling of strength comes up through your head. You have a little nod, little gentle, slow shake just to release any tension there. And we're going to take, in a moment, 3 nice deep breaths together, if you wish. We'll breathe in through our nose and we'll hold, and then we'll breathe out through our mouth. Pause for a moment and do it again. And I'll guide us through that, but you're very welcome to breathe how you wish. This is just an invitation. So let's take a nice deep breath in and hold and let it out. And another breath in and hold and let it out. And a last breath in together and hold and let it out. Lovely. Give yourself a little gentle wiggle, tap your fingers, toes, whatever feels good, and then slowly flutter your eyelids open. Can be quite bright coming back. Thank you, everybody. That's really lovely. That helps me to get focused. I hope it helped you too. So, jumping right in, why did Spectra commission this research work? So, we've been around since 2014. And over the last 10 or so years, we've seen lots of brilliant examples across the whole country of learning disabled artists leading creative work. But what we'd seen much, much less of was learning disabled people in managerial roles and making strategic decisions. And because that's something that we've been working on and that we're really interested in doing even more of and doing more deeply, we started it back in 2024 and commissioned Hazel to look into the places where this was happening. So that initial piece of research was called Where Are the Managers? And in it, Hazel interviewed neurodivergent and learning disabled leaders. She interviewed support workers and she interviewed organizations that hire learning disabled and neurodivergent people. She spoke with all of these people about what it was like to meet their access needs, what their working cultures were like, and what kind of responsibilities they had in their jobs. The final report for Where Are the Managers pulls together some really brilliant examples of best practice for employing learning disabled and neurodivergent people. And that, as well as lots of videos of Hazel working her way through the report, are on our website. And I'm going to introduce the lovely Hazel Sealeaf now. Hazel is an artist, a producer, and a researcher from Birmingham who authored both of the reports that we're talking about. So welcome, Hazel, and thank you for all the wonderful research you've done over the last 2.5 years. I'm going to start you off with a question about the first report, and then we'll move on to Who's the Boss, the more recent one. So looking back at that first report, Where Are the Managers? Are there any findings that feel more or less important after this new research?
Thanks, Kate. 2.5 years is a long time. But yeah. Um, yeah, I think one thing looking back at it was just realizing I'm much better at structuring reports this time around. And I feel like looking back, I was like, I would have changed some of these things in the structure. But that doesn't count as a finding. Um, yeah, I think one of the biggest findings that still feels really relevant and important is one of the questions I asked in those interviews was whether um, um, whether there were new access needs or reasonable adjustments that came up for people with learning disabilities when they started working in high level jobs. And the main answer was no. It was mostly the same things that supported them in those roles. And the biggest one was still time. Time was just by far the thing that people mentioned most often, just more time to understand information, more time to try things out, to experiment. And that was still the overarching thing, like regardless of whether they were chairs, whether they were producers, whether they were consultants, whether they were access support roles, like those access support needs didn't really change compared to when they were artists. And that was also like a very common pathway for a lot of people in senior level roles who had learning disabilities, begun as artists and then moved into senior leadership within those same organizations. Um, and I was looking back at it and I was thinking about why that feels so important, that idea of more time. One of the interesting things about the first report was that it was looking at both people with learning disabilities and people who are neurodivergent more generally, but not necessarily who had learning disabilities. And I think what was interesting was there were experiences of neurodivergent leaders who were working in kind of a wider variety of organizations, not necessarily just the organizations where they grew up as artists. And the culture of those organizations being such that kind of senior level roles, part of what's expected at that level is to just be able to just adapt to very short timescales. That's just part of what's expected. That's part of what the culture is at those kind of high level positions. And that was one of the most difficult things for other neurodivergent leaders, for autistic leaders, to deal with, was this sense of like their access needs were kind of being respected until something needed to be done quickly, and then it was this understanding of like you're going to go above and beyond what you are comfortable doing, what you're safe doing, in order to get things done. Um, and so that was like a big issue that was coming up. So with this round of research, and with the last one as well, just the idea of time being the most important need for learning disabled leaders. When we were talking to organizations who were doing it well, it just forced them to slow down, and it kind of forced those organizations to change the way that they worked, to give a lot more space, and it kind of changed some of the sense of priorities and urgency in those organizations. Um, yeah, so I think that finding just feels quite just very instructive, but also very simple of just kind of like time is the biggest thing that makes a difference when you're talking about training and employing people with learning disabilities. I hope that made sense. It was my first answer, so it's probably waffly. Hopefully, I'll get better at speaking more succinctly as the event goes on.
That's, I think you speak how you need. We can pull the gems out, Hazel. That was clear. And I think I mean, it certainly, I'm sure there are folks from Spectra that really resonates with us. And interesting to me that it is simple, but given the culture and grind culture and how much we're meant to produce, and timescales being what they are, it's also it's a simple idea, but it's very, very hard to change. Those things are deep rooted. So this work feels really important because of that. And I think there's also some really practical ways that you've broken that down in the research in terms of not just slow down, change your pace, but kind of more specific ways of approaching that, which are in the report. Great. So you've kind of led us nicely into the more recent report, which is called "Who's the Boss?" And how we got there was that Where Are the Managers taught us that most of the people employed in the kind of roles we were hoping to create had done specific training programs or internships on their way to getting to those roles. So the next logical step for us was to commission research into that kind of training. And before Hazel got started, we made an important decision to focus the second part of the research specifically on training for learning disabled people, rather than for learning disabled and neurodivergent. Now, obviously, there are many human beings who contain those two things within themselves. But what we saw in the first report, indeed, was that there's lots of good practice that covers kind of both for learning disabled and neurodivergent folks, but that there were some differences. And that while there was this really encouraging increase in the amount of training programs and the amount of people in positions between the end of the first report and the start of the second report, that seemed to be happening much more rapidly, much more quickly in the world of kind of neurodivergence. So it felt to us that focusing specifically on what works best for people with learning disabled would give us like a chance to do that deeply and get more rich information, but also that it was still where the need was greatest. So now that I've kind of set the stage for the Who's the Boss report, I'd like to introduce Paul Wilshaw and Charlotte Little, both of whom are very well established and successful leaders, and both of whom took part in the research. Paul is the Disability Advisory Support at Mind the Gap, and he's also a freelance access consultant, an event host, and an MC, and he's here representing himself. He's not here to represent any organization. And Charlotte is an actor, a workshop facilitator, and chair of the board at DIY Theatre. So I'm going to ask you both the same question. And if we can start, Paul, if you don't mind, you can be the first to answer, and Charlotte, you go second. You've both read a section of the report. Can you tell us what section you read? And can you tell us what you think was the most important idea in that section?
So for me, I worked at the support workers and around benefits. And I found that a lot of people were using access to work to get their support. And But there were other organisations that were finding other ways of coping with having support workers. And I found that really interesting, especially since I've become a freelance artist myself, and the fact of that there's situations of where access to work have not understood the difference between going freelance and having a PAYE job, um, which has meant that I'm only able to receive 8 hours of support so far because they have not, they just don't understand what I'm talking about. When my Mind Gaps got involved to try and support me, it's just got complicated. And then you also have the fact of they're not now accepting emails access to work. So that's caused me more problems because I used to have one caseworker, and now you never know who you're going to talk to from day to day. Um, so that's been for me. But I'm also the fact of that I also came from a performance from Mind the Gap. I was an actor in the company, and I've moved from that all the way through to being an intern assistant producer, an assistant producer, an engagement advocacy worker, and most recently a disability support. Um, and during that, it was also, and it states this in the report about being a participant to being a trainee, which alters the support dynamics and relationships that you have. And I did find that I like you when you there's sometimes in organisations a upstairs downstairs kind of mode for some organisations of where I as a participant always was like I want to know what's going up on the top. I want to know what's like. I want to be in the engine room making the decisions. And I always found that really interesting. But I also found at the beginning, um, I had a really close relationship with my um, boss, who is a friend of mine as well. But when she moved, it also led to other situations happening of where the support that I had kind of changed because a new person came in and I had to build that relationship up again. So it was always when a person leaves, I always found I was finding having to try and make a new relationship. And yeah, so that was always an interesting dynamic. So I think when it says about moving from being a participant to a trainee, supporting the dynamics and relationships, I really do think that was really um, interesting on the learning for other artists as well as myself.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. Thank you so much. I think kind of picking out something that's uh, like a support need in terms of really practical things, in terms of access to work, and the difficulties there of almost needing a support worker to help you deal with access to work. Um, and then also that kind of the emotional experience of I love that upstairs downstairs analogy. I think that's a really great way of understanding that. And that's a bit from the report that I've noted down and attentive to too. Thank you, Charlotte. How about you? Which bit did you read and did
So
you
I
like?
read Building on Strengths. Um, I like how you can you don't have to know everything. You can learn different strengths through different traineeships, and I liked how you can make like a strength, and then throughout it, you can like have targets where you can where the target is kind of like a stepping stone to know what you're doing in the strength.
That's great. Are, so when you started your traineeship, was there something you thought, oh, I don't know about that, but
There's probably like loads of things that I probably needed to like build on, but that's what I like about tree building, because you don't need to know everything. You can just you you might know a little bit about the shape, but then you can just build on it.
that's great. I think that's it. Yeah, and the idea of building on strength is just that, needing that kind of like open-minded approach and what they call it, growth mindset, that kind of growing on things, even as you're kind of sometimes you need to figure out what you don't know so that you can learn
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, that's great, Charlotte. Thanks very much. So I'll come back to you now, Hazel, if that's okay. And just coming back to the report as a whole, what didn't make it into the report that you wish people knew about?
Thanks, Kate. I'm going to look at my notes because I've forgotten what I thought would be interesting to tell people. Um, awful thing where I didn't save my notes. It would be upsetting. No, it's just on my laptop, not on my phone. That's helpful. Yeah, what didn't make it into the report? So I think some of them were actually just quite small tips that just didn't fit into like a general category. One thing that I thought was really interesting was uh, one person I interviewed who worked at the organization talked about just needing to build in priorities. In that situation, it was talking about the fact that um, by having a co-chair of the board who was a learning disabled person, that just kind of always meant and always required that easy reads were going to be a necessary thing, and it kind of left them fewer outs basically. And there was just a really interesting kind of reflective moment for them of kind of knowing that if they gave themselves an out and a way of not having some of those access supports in place, then when budget was tight, when time was short, then that stuff would probably get diluted down or not get to happen at all. So that idea of just quite intentionally being just not giving themselves that out was quite a deliberate decision that they made, and kind of by saying this person is a co-chair and this person is always going to be kind of leading us through the agenda kind of required that to be the case, which I like as both a specific tangible example and also just that idea of, yeah, the more baked in you can make um, yeah, just don't give yourselves outs as a useful way of kind of making sure that things do get followed through. And um, what else was there? There was some stuff that was just a little bit messy and didn't have quite clear like recommendations to come out of it, and I didn't have a great way of talking about in the research. Um, there was stuff around conflict and um, uh, agreeability and um, stuff where in some kind of like director co-director conversations, just the ways that conflict played out. Um, just take your time, Hazel. Figure out what you want to say here. I think what it is kind of not it was situations where a non-learning disabled co-director needing to be comfortable with not bending on their decision just because their other co-director was a learning disabled person, like if they strongly felt like that was not going to be the right decision. And um, uh, having just being willing to have it out and have like an argument and a discussion, and not shying away from that was an important idea that came up. The other side of that as well was kind of an awareness of when the flip of that dynamic was happening, where a learning disabled co-director or trainee was kind of like agreeing with their co-director out of a sense of kind of like, well, you know best, and kind of saying yes to things that were not that maybe weren't being properly considered and thought through. And the co-director in that situation kind of needing to ask more questions to kind of get to a more genuine understanding of what their co-director actually felt about an issue. So yeah, I think just like an awareness of the ways that power dynamics, I suppose, between learning disabled and non-learning disabled people who were sharing a job, knowing that sometimes that meant that there was going to be agreement that was false, and sometimes knowing that that needed unpicking, and that it was important not to just let that happen, I guess. Yeah.
That's so interesting, Hazel. That's really great to hear about that. I might ask you more about that at our next meeting, since it's not in the report. I'm glad we've had this opportunity. I think there's so much to think about there in terms of just how we all work together, regardless of what categories or regardless of how our brains work, that kind of like truly, genuinely, authentically collaborating with each other sometimes means you gotta walk through a bit of conflict together, or you have to, if someone's agreeing with you, you have to really invite them to 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 find ways to be comfortable and confident enough to disagree with you, which is a funny thing to invite sometimes, but really, really worthwhile in terms of collaboration. That's super interesting. I'm making a star next to it in my notebook, and we're coming back to that. Thank you. So, next question is going to be for all three of you. Charlotte, maybe you can start off, and then we'll pass to Paul, and then we'll pass to Hazel. And the question that I want to ask you is, what do you want to happen because of this report?
I'd like more people to realise that just because you've got a disability, you still could get like a paid job, or you can get like start off as like a volunteer and then go into a paid job. Because there's not a lot of companies what I could actually name what have actually paid people to have a paid job.
Yeah, that would be great. Agree with you 100%, Charlotte. Paul, how about you?
I would like to see it going to places like the Arts Council personally. I think due to the fact of they've just done the All In project, which is to support disabled people and audiences, not having to always have to give information to venues and organisations. I think something like this will also support the Arts Council into understanding more around learning disability and the support that's needed and how we can progress that. So yeah, places like the Arts Council, Disability Online, places where, but also to non-disabled organisations that might already have that fear um, of employing learning disabled people. So yeah, that's where I would like to see it go next.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think we are lucky that there might be some Arts Council people listening to us right now, which is they're very welcome. But I think that point about organizations that aren't working with learning disabled people yet, that they're the people we want most to, not necessarily most, but it's super important for them to engage with this as well, because that's where we need to really start knocking those doors open. Thanks, Paul. Hazel, how about you? What do you want to happen because of this report?
I'm still processing Paul's answer a little bit. Yeah, I think agreeing with Charlotte as well. Like, I think when I was starting this report, like I was aware of kind of like situations where organizations were like, well, yeah, we want to do this, but we're a little bit scared and we don't understand the risks, and a little bit of just kind of zero exposure, just like people working in mainstream settings and mainstream arts organizations don't know any people with learning disabilities, no idea what it would mean to be employing people. So yeah, I did want to be holding a thing that just kind of says, you can do it, it'll be fine, pretty much. Just have something to be kind of like, you can do, like, it won't all fall apart. Like, it's, so yes, so that being part of it, what was, I had another thought after what Paul said. Um, it has gone. It'll come back to me later.
That's okay. When it does, just I know it will. So when it does, just go, I've got it, and we'll come back to that. Yeah, I think there's I imagine that if you're here and you've come to listen, then the kind of you'll be in agreement largely with those things happen. You know, that these changes are the things we want to happen. We want to see people with learning disabilities employed all over the place, not just in the arts sector. But yes, Hazel, that very simple sign of just like, you can do it. It's just, just it takes a willingness, but there's also a lot of I knew if I rambled it would come. There we go, Hazel. Bring it.
Sorry, yeah. I think the other thing that I wanted it to do was test a little bit of an assumption. And I want to be careful with what I'm saying. Um, what you were noticing as well when commissioning this research was kind of like there's a lot of creative leadership. What was also there was maybe a little bit of a lack of appetite for managerial level leadership, and there were a lot of what I think is really important work challenging the idea of leadership. We don't actually talk a lot about in the report, but I think underpins a lot of it, about the idea of like a leader doesn't need to be one person steering a whole ship. This idea of like heroic individual isn't what a leader needs to look like. And a lot of how that was playing out in learning disabled organizations, feeling like, well, we can have this kind of like collective model of leadership that also where people with learning disabilities are involved in the creative leadership, but that some of the handling of like relationships with partners and funders and stakeholders, work that is that not being something that organizations really felt like a big appetite to look at how to do a little bit, as like a consequence of this thinking about kind of like, well, collective leadership is where we're moving towards, so maybe we don't need at all a person with a learning disability to be able to do that role. And I don't necessarily think that we do like that needs to be the thing that we're going for. Like, I don't think we really like want like a full outcome of this being kind of senior leadership teams all look the same and are structured the same, and it's just learning disabled people are the ones in those senior level roles. Like I think just for lots of reasons, the structure of senior leadership needs to change, and it needs to work differently. But I wanted this research to also prove that learning disabled people are capable of having those skills, and it's not just because we're maybe trying to get away from like very traditional hierarchical ideas of like heroic people are the ones who run the organization, and maybe we're talking about like wanting to have structures where there's lots of leaders who will make different types of decisions. We still need some of the people involved in making logistics decisions and strategic decisions to be people with learning disabilities. They can't just be creative. That was very long and rambling to get to that. But yeah, I think that was one of the things I wanted to get to, was kind of this idea of the skills involved in being this type of leader are skills that learning disabled people have.
Yes.
You get better at.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, Hazel. I think that's actually just speaking on like the way we think about things at Spectra, is that that is what's radical. It's about if you have people who haven't traditionally held positions bringing a completely new perspective to that, it can really truly change things. So whether it's logistics or partnership working or fundraising or things that we might have siphoned off of what we would consider accessible leadership, that absolutely kind of having that like we can go anywhere with this together, and it's only going to bring new ideas and new ways of doing things, or better ways of doing things, and I think that's part of what makes it so exciting as well. So yeah, I followed you on your journey there. It was great. Thank you. And
Paul
Paul,
has a hand.
do you want to add something?
You're on mute at the moment, Paul.
Oh, sorry, I can't see what he was speaking.
Yeah. I also want to make sure that reports like this don't actually go unanswered, because what I think always happens is that there's reports like these, and um, but the everyone thinks that they're changing the wheel, and I think we need to make sure that reports like this is that everyone sees it. So we're still representing the people that have gone before and knowing what we've done, but also making sure that the younger generation actually recognises people and projects and things like this, so that they're not feeling that they have to come up and change everything again. Because I think that's where I have found that a lot of the time, like I've been doing talks for like 20 years, and it's still the same. Sadly, a lot of the time you hear the same conversations by people that have been doing the same conversations like for 40 odd years. And I think there's the whole point of that a lot of young people, myself included, don't recognise what has gone before us, and then feel that we are changing everything. Um, and I think it's less in the learning disability world, because I think we are. It is people are starting to recognise now the learning disabled community a bit more in the arts. But I definitely feel when it comes to physically disabled or people, that you do forget what has gone before us. So I want to make sure that stuff like this is archived, as well as properly given its space in the here and now. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I can hear both things, Paul. I've been around for a few years as well, and I know that there when you hear some of the same conversations, it can feel a little bit disheartening. But I think you also just said that you feel like the learning disabled arts world is getting a little bit more notice as well. So I guess it's keeping that balance in mind to keep yourself going, noticing the changes, but yeah, just so you can keep pushing where it's important. And I'm gonna come to you for another question now, Paul, if that's all right. Kind of coming off the back of that experience you've just mentioned, you've co-led lots of conferences, training courses, and productions. So what does co-production feel like when it's working well?
When it's working well, it doesn't. I think it just means that you both know what your strengths are, and I think that's important. I'm not brilliant with finances, and so, but I'm very good at coming up with ideas. So making sure that I've got someone that's co-leading with me on stuff. I also recognise it as something that's. I wish more organisations would do this personally, because I think looking at it, what organisations don't recognise is that they're getting two for the price of one sometimes. Um, and so you've got two people coming at the same project with different ideas. So I wish that instead of it always being, oh yeah, you've got one director or you've got one MC or something like that or whatever it is. If you have two people, you can, yeah, it means that that person might not get paid as much as the other person. Like, it should always be the same amount of money for the same people, is what I'm trying to say. But I just wish organisations would actually try and use the co-partnership model a lot more than what they do, because you're getting two people's strengths, not just one. So, um, so yeah, for me, it definitely works. But it also gives me freedom. It gives me freedom to be able to say, is this working? Does that not work? Why isn't that working? Do you think if I'm doing it like, it's kind of another support worker for me, having a good partner. It's like having a support worker. If you're working with me and you're working well with me, we can bounce ideas off each other and bring our expertise to the forefront rather than just being me panicking that I've got something wrong. So yeah, for me definitely. I think a prime example of that was one of my training courses that I'd done at Leeds Playhouse, when I'd done an introduction to producing course. I had a non-disabled producer working with me, and him and me just worked so well together, and we were just like, we're always making our schedules, making sure that with the hybrid version that we knew what we were doing, who was going to talk to in the hybrid. If there's people that were online, how that would work together. Um, and so yeah, I've done this whole project of where it was for learning to say with neurodiverse people to become producers. And it was during my time I was working as an agent for Change for Leeds Playhouse. And they done a course also in introduction to directing and playwriting. So, and it was a whole 12-week course, and at the end of it, they actually put on a show. Um, and it was just amazing because it was a disabled person and a non-disabled person. So we had a disabled director. It wasn't just learning disabled, it was disabled people in general. Disabled director, disabled playwright, and a disabled producer, and three non-disabled people all working together. Um, and yeah, it was just amazing to work on that project, especially as at the end of the show, there was a time that Bradford found out that we had run the City of Culture, So I literally found out on the TV during the show that we had one scene of culture and I was had to do a set change. And I was running on and nearly cried my eyes out during the
Oh,
set
wow.
change. So yeah,
That's really
that's
memorable.
so it's having the right person, but also finding the right people to work with
Mhm.
you. Um, don't just go with the person that's like the organisation wants you to work with. If that partnership's not working, have the confidence. And I know that's a very easy thing for me to say, but I've had to have stand up and say, this ain't working, or why hasn't this worked?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I think it's you have to find the right partner. It's always about the two can dance, but one person might step on your foot if it's not the right person. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
great. That's really great, Paul. I think that that draws nicely. I mean, what you said when you first started speaking was about both knowing your strengths, and I'm remembering the section that Charlotte picked out from the report about kind of building on strengths as well, and also pulling in what Hazel was talking about that kind of being confident and comfortable enough with that person that you're working with to work through um, differences of opinion, but also kind of so both building on strengths where you complement each other really well, but also being able to be really honest with each other. And I guess that relationship then stands as almost kind of like a demonstration of other ways that could ripple out beyond the creative process, beyond the thing that's made into the wider world, which
yeah.
is really interesting. Charlotte, I'm coming to you for another question now. Thanks very much, Paul. So, you are the chair of the board, DIY. Have you ever had any? This is nice following on from this topic of conflict and dealing with it. Have you ever disagreed with another board member in a meeting, and how did you handle it?
Um, Touch wood, up to now I haven't had any any disagreements, but sometimes I more disagree if like a funder's like knocked us back. Sometimes some funders do give us good criticism so we can critique it, or sometimes if they don't give us like any feedback, I'm more like, should we go back? Should we not go back? But the way DIY board works is if we do have any disagreements, we more talk it out than kind of like argue against each other.
Hmm. Do you have a system for doing that, or does it happen naturally?
Um, I think it happens naturally, because we're always putting in like lots and lots of bids to different funders. Some usually give us like the money, but then we get like one, like say one or two, what may not.
Hmm.
But sometimes we ask for feedback and they might not give it us. So then we have to like make a decision like, do we look somewhere else or do we go back to that person and say, um, maybe we could adapt the application, or if we can, then maybe look somewhere else.
Mm, yes, I think that's a kind of discussion that quite a few of us in this room can definitely um, have in common, with you, and working through exactly how to respond to those things. It sounds like your board meetings have a really good environment, which is
Yeah, they do.
testament to you, Charlotte, as the chair, hold creating that. Right. One more question from me. Um, and that'll be for all three of you again. And if we can go Hazel and then Paul and then Charlotte. Um, and I'm just going to pause for a moment. I think that most of us in the room probably know the difference between equality and equity, but just to be sure, equality is when everybody gets the same thing. And equity is when we think about the fact that different people have different needs and we make sure that everybody gets what they need. And if you're working towards equity, you're probably thinking about changing a whole system rather than and just individuals, although you kind of have to think about both. So, to all three of you, starting with Hazel, what still needs to happen to achieve equity for learning disabled people in the arts? It's a big question.
Yeah, I think what Paul was highlighting as well of just like learning disability arts is a little bit of like a micro sector, and I think there's still a lot of work to do to have mainstream art centres and spaces like them actively employing learning disabled people at a high level. And that's starting to happen a little bit, like with Amy at DIY and the Transforming Leadership program. Like there being like residencies within other art spaces, but there's also just a lot of that wasn't always easy, and it is quite hard, and it's quite confronting, and I think it's a different within our micro sector. There's there is a generally much more of a willingness from everyone involved to kind of be like, we need to be getting closer to having more people with learning disabilities, having more power, having more choice, having more control, and that is like our reason for doing stuff. And the mainstream art sector, like that is not. I'm rambling. I'm not saying words. I'm saying words in the order they're coming into my head, and I'm not thinking about them. But that's what I wanted to say. Was basically what Paul said earlier. Mainstream art and art venues need to also be part of these conversations, and we need to find ways of engaging with them and encouraging them to take these risks. And yeah, I think the other thing Paul said, kind of, I think groups like funders like the Arts Council and other sector support kind of mechanisms need to find ways of encouraging and supporting those parts of the sector to take these risks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's great. I think that will be a real measure of success, wouldn't it, if it was just a more typical thing all across the sector. I think that would be great. Paul, how about you? What still needs to happen to achieve equity?
I think what really needs to happen is the bosses of mainstream organisations actually coming into these meetings. There's a lot of the times where you'll see the people on the floor, the people that work in the disability art sector for the organisation will go to these meetings. However, you don't see the producer or you don't see the the executive director of the big organisations. And so when you get an organisation that will say, we want to get 20% of our audiences into the venue, or we want to get 4 shows with a learned disabled or disabled cast, the main bosses at the top will say, why no? And it's always it's never, you only see, especially at conferences as well, you'll see the people that are doing this kind of work on the ground at these events. However, you don't see the big, because I totally get it. They're trying to keep their theatres going and the running and all that. I totally get it. But also, we need to start seeing those to actually help them recognise that we are valued as organisations, but also as audience members, and we've got to stop that. We've got to start challenging that rhetoric of, but why should we employ? I've done a whole project called Roots Out, which actually was talking to venues and organisations about what the barriers were to Highland disabled people. One of the major ones that came out of that was the fear of getting saying stuff that was wrong, or that the organisation was too small, or and things like that. And I think it's how do we, as individuals as well as organisations, kind of help change that rhetoric. And I'm saying words that are jargon, and I shouldn't, because I know that's not what I should be doing. And I'm sorry, carry. They should stop saying that they can't do it and understand what those barriers are. And I think we as the Learn Disabled community can also support that and help change what's happening at the moment. So yeah,
That's great, Paul. I think that's a real clear statement of intent. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think we are in a room full of people who are already convinced of that value. So it's about getting people into the room who need to be shown it. I don't feel like takes much convincing once you show people. But yeah, Charlotte, how about you?
I'd probably say change people's way of because like most of us are there, but like you get on where or if you've got a disability you can't do this job, you can't do that job.
Sorry, Charlotte, you're breaking up just a little bit. I didn't get that well enough.
Alright.
Will you try again, please?
I was just saying, like, so say you have what's got non-disability who's a builder who thinks like that job can't go to someone with a disability. Like assumptions and like don't assume someone can do something just because they've got a disability.
So that's our piece of work, is it? That's what needs to change.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, change people's mind instead of like saying like someone with a disability is kind of like stupid when they're not. They just work in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of that's. We've got our clear like to-do list, our clear call to action. It's about changing minds. It's about getting in touch with people who need to have their minds opened up as well. Those are great answers, everybody. Thank you. So we are going to see if there are any questions from the audience in a moment, but to give the audience a chance to have a think if they're not already ready, and just because we've been sat for a while, we're just going to have a little shake break. So you can kind of do what you want. I'm going to do some shaking over here because I'm not easily embarrassed. I'm a trained drama practitioner. I can wobble on a screen like the best of them. So if you want to shake with me, you can shake with me. If you want to turn your screen off and shake, that's fine too. If you want to get up and move around, whatever makes you feel good. Hi, Isaac. It's nice to shake with you. Ooh, that's good. Thank you very much, everybody. So, have we got any questions from the audience? And it would be useful if you are asking a question, if you can tell us whether you want to ask one person in particular or you want to have everyone on the panel answer it. And you can... Isaac's got a hand.
Hello, I have a question. Hello. Thank you for all of your words and responses and everything prepared. Thank you very much. I had a question something that came up. How, and this I think Hazel first, but if Charlotte, if Paul have something to add, please do. Are there really big differences in how support workers, helper manager, compared to how a co-director who is job sharing helps a manager? Like, is that something that you've picked up on research or had in your experience?
Yeah, I think Paul and Charlotte they will have things to say as well. So your question was, are support workers for managers doing different things to kind of co-directors, job share partners? Is that right? Yeah. Um, yeah, quite often, and I think one of the parts of the report talks about that being quite an important separation in a lot of cases. Um, so, and I'm aware Paul talked about kind of a coworker when it's going well feeling like another support worker. And I don't need to talk to what Paul was saying. Support workers quite often quite logistics type support. A lot of kind of support with calendars, emails, kind of time management, figuring out kind of the structure of like people's weeks, and helping them think ahead of kind of okay, you've got that meeting. Is there any kind of extra support we might need for that meeting, etc. And in some organizations, like that kind of support worker role, and it's not always called a support worker. It can, at some places, it's kind of there most of the time, and in some places, it's kind of like just once a week. And kind of co-directors and job share roles, that's a lot more. It's a lot less about providing support, and it's a lot more about making joint decisions and doing things together. So like your support worker probably isn't the person who's leading a workshop with you. That's going to be your co-facilitator or your co-director who's working with those groups or who's helping plan the festival. And I think it's an important distinction because of some of what we were talking about with the conflict stuff. As a support worker, your main job is how do I help this person have the best ideas they can have? How can I make sure that their ideas are being communicated and that they're getting their fair say? And there's some extent to which it's important to help the person you're supporting think about like, do you really mean that? Is there another way of saying that? Like, have you checked with your own feelings on that? Whereas like with a co-director, like your job is to make the best work that you can with this other person. And that involves a different set of like, you need to be thinking about kind of like, your job is not, you need to be thinking about your own ideas and how you're bringing your own ideas forward and how you're bringing forward ideas that are going to complement your partner, that are maybe going to challenge your partner in a way that's quite different to the way that support workers think and feel and operate. Did that sound right, Paul and Charlotte?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, Hazel. It sounds right. I mean, I don't personally like the word support worker. And I've said this before, but I like the word creative enabler personally because they're enabling me to do my best work. So that's how I call my person is a creative enabler. But yeah, I definitely think what you said, Hazel, is exactly right. So yeah.
I think so in DIY we sometimes like share the support, but if you've got like if you have one support worker and then they either like leave or they get a different job, then that person's like kind of like has to go back to like square one of like who can that who can the support worker be? How can you trust that person? And like they might, even if they have different, depending on what needs they might overget stimulated.
So what do we do to stop that happening?
Make sure they have the same person consistently.
Yeah, thank you very much. That seems really it seems really striking that like having that consistent person that could like being a co-director that's like keeps it being the same person for you across the job. That's interesting. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Isaac. I think it's really, I'll talk in a moment about things that Spectra's up to off the back of these reports, and that is really pertinent. That's really important to us right now at the moment. Just that question. So, Paul, Hazel, I've read your report, so I knew some of what your thoughts would be in response. But Paul and Charlotte, it's great to hear some more from you. Have we got any more questions from the audience?
Anthony has a hand.
I'm sorry, I can't see. Anthony. Hi, Anthony. Sorry, everyone's like, my screens keep rotating. It's like this weird living mosaic. But Anthony, hello.
Hi, everyone. So also, I should say, like, I'm trialing contact lenses at the moment, so my eyes are all over the place. So sorry if I'm looking a bit glazed over at different points.
Quite all right.
It's lovely to see everyone. Nice to see so many familiar faces as well. Yeah, my name's Anthony. I work at a place called Culture Central. I have got a bit of a question, probably maybe more for Hazel, but again, everyone else feel free to jump in. But I'm really interested in kind of like I think this research is really, really useful, and actually there's a lot for us to learn and share as well from it. But I wondered like if there was a bit of a distinction between like, well, I guess I don't like these terms, but creative and non-creative leadership roles, and if there's anything that kind of came out of the research with that. Like, so when I think of lots of different arts organizations, you kind of have like the creative director person or maybe the executive director person. Was there anything particularly that kind of came out? Sorry, let me go back a little bit as well. So a lot of the work that we do looks particularly at things like what we might call strategy or policy, or the kind of like these kind of like important parts of the work or research or this type of stuff. And I wondered if there was anything that you found from kind of what you've been looking at or the conversations you'd had with people about how that works in the context of the research as well. I'm not sure if I worded that question very well. Sorry.
It's okay. I think I do want to ask you to try again. I think what I thought you were asking was whether the research showed any differences in, and I don't know if the question is like any differences in like how people were trained to do creative leadership versus kind of non-creative leadership, or if your question was kind of like whether there were distinctions at all between kind of like creative leaders and less creative leaders.
Yeah, I guess it's if you, with all the people that you've spoken to, did you find anything like were there any particular differences in people's experience of that, whether or not they've done kind of more creative stuff or more sort of like business type stuff or whatever you want to call it? But yeah, if there's anything also on how people get into that and the sort of the routes into it, that would be really interesting to unpick. Thank you for helping me work that out.
Please. Yeah, I think there's little bits there. So I think one thing to just say is that a lot fewer people have done non-creative leadership generally, neurodivergent and folks with learning disabilities. The most common ways that people are doing kind of less creative leadership is governance roles, but I think one of the key takeaways has actually been that like a lot of how to do that is to inject some creativity into processes that feel quite non-creative. Has been like to have your board meetings look and feel a little bit more like workshops. Have there be creative exercises. Have there be ways for so in the context of like somebody's like leading or chairing a process that involves other people with learning disabilities, and their role is kind of chair and feels like this governance role. Like a lot of what they're doing is helping their organization think about like, well, how do we break down this? Sorry, Sue, I'm stealing your kind of language of kind of like asking good questions and asking the right questions. And is helping organizations break down what feel like quite complicated questions of kind of like, you know, Arts Council risk assessment templates. Like, what do we think this activity falls under? Is helping break that question down into something that is going to be more, that is going to allow more people to understand it and contribute meaningfully to what the response is going to be. So yeah, I think some of the distinction is like, there is a distinction there. But it looks like allowing a bit more creativity into some of those less creative roles. And give me a moment to think if there was other important things to say there. Actually, I think that's the thing I should say is just kind of like pointing towards where some of that work is happening and it's being done well. So at DIY, like Amy is also like chairing a policy writing group. And so that's happening there and that's going really great. Also within Spectra, there's kind of the geeking out and governance work and a lot of policy writing is happening as part of that as well. And yeah, I think producing has been an interesting area, and I, like Paul, I think is one of the only people who've been employed in kind of like an area of producing nationwide at all. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say on that at the moment. Sorry, I'm definitely losing my cognitive ability.
No, that's really helpful. What it makes me think of is so what my assumption was, right, that lots of people kind of are excluded in different ways from those like kind of policy type roles. And so I guess it's really interesting and useful to me because I can think of lots of different types of solidarity, I guess, between people that are normally included in what I've seen as like policy or leadership or strategy conversations. And it's just helping me think a little bit more about how we can shift some of that. So yeah, thank you.
I think one part of that as well is just kind of making those conversations more tangible than we normally have in those conversations, because that is the most abstract world imaginable, where we reference theories that are about critiquing other theories, and like almost all of the job is just making it as tangible as you can, and that being a really big thing that comes up.
Not to take over the conversation, but just to add in, and what I always say is like when I first started doing this job here and like coming back into the West Midlands was like I was going into lots of rooms with people that would describe themselves as policy people. And I was like, what's a policy person? Surely we're all policy people, right? So yeah, it makes me think of that, and thank you.
Great. Policy people. I think we might need to adapt it as a theme song for our policy group. Do you want to add something, Charlotte?
I was just going to say, so when we had evaluation last time, we made it like in a creative sort of tree. So we had like all questions like on one page, but there was like asking number one could be like the roots, number two could be like the bark, number three could be like the leaves.
Gorgeous. We do something similar with a rose and buds and thorns, and that's really nice having that kind of imagery. It does make it just what Anthony, that kind of makes it more tangible, something that you can hold on to rather than just words and ideas out there. Any more questions from anyone else? Yes, Jenny.
Find my button. What's next?
Wow.
I mean, this is amazing stuff, and I've been pushing it at lots of colleagues to say, you know, this Spectra's doing this work, this research. Hazel, I was so thrilled when I first saw you popping up on where are the leaders, you know. You mentioned making a very deliberate decision to follow the learning disability route, LD route on this one. Are you going to continue along this path, or are you going to circle back to look at ND? It doesn't sounds like everyone else has got that covered, to be honest. So, you know, what are your views of continuing to sort of make this happen?
Yes. I said wow because it was like you were looking at my
Oh, sorry.
No, it's great. It's like the most beautiful organic segue. Thank you, Jenny. I'll move
You're
into
welcome.
the next section. We did not plan that in advance. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about what Spectra's doing next, and then I'll be sure to come back to Hazel and Charlotte and Paul as well. So we're working on lots of things. We've got kind of our usual wonderful artistic celebrations, like we've got a show about stained glass we're doing locally at Wednesbury Museum at the beginning of July. We've got a summer solstice celebration at our garden in the Commons. So it's all of the kind of co-creation work is continuing, and we've got two big programs that I think come off the back of this one of which Hazel's already mentioned, which is Geeking Out on Governance, and that's our inclusive governance project. And through that we've got a steering group which has 7 members, all learning disabled, that works with our board and our staff to make strategic decisions, and they've been going for a year and a half or so. I can never remember exactly when we started, but really talking about like how, if we're a steering group, how do we steer? How do we make the decisions? What do we do? And so kind of really trying to get down to doing those things for real rather than just putting a particular label on it. That same group of people have split into 2, and some of them are working with another researcher called Emily Churchill-Zara, looking at research into how creative approaches can help make governance more inclusive. So that's talking about this kind of co-creating is the word we use for it these days, co-creating way of working together and using creative practices, like you were just saying, Hazel, about, you know, how do you get those non-creative things more interesting, make it more creative, like make it more fun, make it more engaging, make it practical and experience rather than just words. And we're also working with an artist called Ashok Mistry to develop creative versions of our policies so that they are more meaningfully inclusive. There will be easy read versions as well, but that's one level. We think there's deeper that you can go by using creative means. Josie, can I pass to you for just a moment to do a little bit of a Goog network plug?
Yeah, and one more thing to add to the list is we are creating a Goog network, so an inclusive governance network for freelancers and organizations who are interested in inclusive governance that is inclusive for learning disabled people in general. And so not everybody in the network works in the disability arts arena. There's some mainstream organizations, there's some organizations who maybe have projects, but the idea is to like have a wider circle of critical friends, I guess, and for us to share what's working for us, what's working for other people, and what issues are we bumping into, and how can we just share learning better. Because I think one of the issues is, and this has come up several times today as well in this event, is that there's not enough. We're not sharing enough. We're not talking enough to other people. So, the first ever inaugural meeting is on the 23rd of June in the afternoon. If anyone's interested, please get in touch or send me a message in the chat, and I'll send you all the details. And I'll pass back to you, Kate.
Thank you, Josie. Yeah, and that's great. I think also following on from what Paul said, that kind of like the fact that there are non-disability centered organizations as part of that feels really, really positive. It's a nice group of people you've pulled together as well. Really interesting folks. And then the work that we're doing that springs directly from Hazel's research is called BOSS. And we are currently right in between our first round of interviews and our second round of interviews. We'll be taking on 2 trainees who will work with us for a year. And also currently just about to send out recruitment for that kind of creative enabler, job coach, support worker role as well. So great to hear more about that from everyone today. So yes, we'll have the BOSS trainees will be with us for a year. They'll be experiencing all the different projects we do. They'll be shadowing individual people and kind of exploring different aspects of how we work, and then figuring out where they want to build their skills in which areas. And we'll do that together. And then at the end of that year, provided everybody's still happy to keep working together, we'll have 2 new roles in our staff team that suit our trainees' desires and skills. And that might mean that my role as creative director shifts somewhat, and I'm really, really up for that. I think I am very happy to kind of move sideways, up, down, around, form a new shape, so that Spectra can really be steered and led by somebody with learning disabilities. So we're coming to the end of our time together. But Hazel, let's go Hazel, then Paul, then Charlotte. Do you want to just briefly tell us what you're working on next?
I haven't thought about what's next in this. I think something I'd still love to happen. In this round of research, we got a little bit closer to having conversations with learning disabled people who are part of kind of the advocacy and self-advocacy movement outside of the creative industries. And I think that's a very interesting space because it's always been led by people with learning disabilities, and it's where just every paid member of SEND has a learning disability, and there are support workers there as well, but that's always been how it's been done. And I think bringing together leaders from the self-advocacy movement and from the creative disability arts, learning disability arts movement is something I'd be really interested in facilitating, because I think those 2 movements have a lot to offer each other. I think that kind of creative storytelling mediums are a really effective way of doing advocacy and kind of doing that work that Charlotte was talking about kind of challenging assumptions, changing how people think about people with disabilities. And I think there's a lot that advocates and people who've been working in that way as kind of campaigners more than as like governance, whereas artists can teach learning disabled and neurodivergent leaders in the sector about campaigning for change and how we can organize and do more organizing, like amongst ourselves and for ourselves, to have more effective change. So that's what I'd like to do next. If anybody wants to fund that, that would be awesome.
That sounds great, Hazel. Sounds like it'd be really powerful. Paul.
So yeah, for me, I have become a director of a company called Documental down in Exeter. So for me, that is that they basically worked with me on a project that I had applied for, and they just we worked together, and then they contacted me and said they wanted me to become a director of the company. So I'm actually going down to Exeter next week to have my first board meeting with the organisation. We're doing a lot of the stuff online, but I'm also going to their choir practice to see everyone, so that's going to be great fun. I've become a board director for a company up in Liverpool called Ward. And creatively, I'm on the 23rd of June. There's a Ramps on the Moon event at the National Youth Theatre, which I'm on the panel for, talking about anti-ableism. And also emceeing and doing a workshop at Kaleidoscope Festival on the 8th of July over in Chester. And I'm actually writing a play at the moment, a radio play, which is dealing with the subject of the Winterbourne scandal, but I've made it into a situation of where the people are actually having to fight in the care home system. It's got a lot of, there's romance in there, there's different aspects of it, but yeah, it's taken from the Winterbourne scandal and the scandals that have been happening in the care home systems towards learning disabled people. So, and it's my first time writing an actual play, which is quite ironic because I was told that I could not get my national diploma because of my writing skills, and now I'm writing a play. So it says quite a bit.
Right on, Paul. You show him. I love it. Wow, you are super busy and these all sound like fantastic projects. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Charlotte, how about you?
So one job what I do at DIY is I do the comms for social media with Joe. It's literally not. And we work together to look at different dates, and if there's any like specific dates, then we try and get content for that. But also, I think you should look at DIY's Facebook page because round December, you know, like our Salford is 100 years. We're also doing a performance sometime in December, and it's going to be all about Salford 100 years.
Fab. I will definitely check out the DIY Facebook page.
Sign up for the newsletter.
I will. If I'm not already. Yes, I will. I hope everyone else will too. Hazel and Paul and Charlotte, thank you so much. Hazel for all your work. Paul and Charlotte for contributing to the report, and also everybody for being here today. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm grateful for all our audience members as well. Thank you for being engaged and being here and being with us. If we could sign off, you don't have to turn your camera on, but if everybody wants to unmute and just say goodbye out loud, if you feel comfortable doing that, that's a nice way to finish.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks very much. Well done.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Loved it. Thank you so much. Well done, Hazel.